Hello everybody, welcome back to Crochet Through Corona and the second day of our crochet along where we're making this JellyPal. By the end of our last session we ended up with the base, which should have looked something like this when you had finished. And today we're going to work on this outer row of tentacles. So this is the part that, to be honest, it's a bit of an endurance test. It really strains your wrists, strains your fingers, and is quite repetitive and sometimes a little bit dull. On the plus side, it's kind of fairly mindless and you can do it while watching telly. So once you've got this first bit, the starting bit right, then you are good to go. So where we need to start, we need to look for where we finished our last round. So I can see this is my join here, and I'm going to come 2 rows down. So 1, 2, and I'm going to start underneath that. I'm going to start 3 rows down. Sorry, I'm just reminding myself here. So you want to go in this part here. So we're going to start 3 rows down. And we will need to insert our hook. Sorry, I'm not used to showing other people this. I just kind of do it on my own and just kind of winging it. But hey, so we're starting on the right hand side of where our join was. And we're counting 1, 2, 3 rows down. And we're looking for a post in between here. So I think I'm going to start on this post here. Can you see? The post being like in between stitches effectively. And I'm going to put my hook through one side of that post and push it back out the other side like that. And that allows me to grab my yarn, which I'm going to try and get in a better position today because it was really frustrating yesterday when it wasn't quite running properly. Okay, so we've got our hook in our work, looking for the end of my yarn, and then we're going to hook the yarn into the top of our hook, as you can see there, and pull it through. And that is effectively how we are casting on this time. So for this first bit, you're going to need to pinch that piece of yarn tight against the base. And then we're going to chain 46, that's a lot. And you do want to keep them fairly tightish if you want your ringlets to be quite tight. So keep an eye on your tension. So that's 46 for me. And then we're going to work back along this chain, and basically we're going to do 2 stitches in every chain. And we're going to do, for this first tentacle, we're going to do 2 single crochet stitches in every chain. So we start in the first chain and the second chain from hook. So the first chain is that one that the yarn's moving through, and we're going into the second chain from hook into the top of that V there. And we're going to do 2 single crochets, and then we're going to do that again on every chain moving down, and that is what is going to give the nice twisted appearance by having the 2. If you wanted even tighter ringlets, you can do 3 chains, 3 crochets into each chain. And that would make it even tighter. It would also mean that you're working for a much longer, and this is already a fairly tedious part of the process, but it's worth it in the end when you've got your cute little JellyPal. And so we're just going to repeat this all the way down. I'm going to show you the first 2 tentacles because they're slightly different. and then I will leave you to do the rest of them yourself. I'll also show you how you finish before I finish this video with one I prepared earlier. It's not the end of the world if you don't get 2 in each one, or if you put a third in each one. It might just make that bit look a little bit different to the rest of it, but as you are kind of going for that curly rustic feel, it's not the end of the world. As you can see, it's starting to curl up already as I work. So you do just need to be careful that as you go, you don't twist the chain, because if you flip the chain over and end up working in the wrong bit of it, then your ringlets will not work. So that is definitely something that I did quite a bit when I first started. So make sure you're keeping your chain in check. And it is quite tight and fiddly if you're wanting that neat, tight curl. Normally I wouldn't crochet quite this with this much tension on my work, but for this it works. And the repetitiveness of it is why I'd say it's quite good to just have something on in the background. Maybe I don't know, whether you like listening to music. Oh, now look what I've done. These things don't happen unless I'm sat in this chair in this room. Never happens when I'm watching telly. I know many people say I have no idea how you do it watching telly. A little bit of practice and I'm sure you're away. I'm sure some of you are already doing it. If not an audiobook. The patterns that are the hardest is when you're trying to count. That becomes tricky, and then you have to be able to zone out from the telly and just focus on what you're doing. If I was any good at video editing or could make the time to try and learn, then this would be a good point for me to be able to fast forward. But I'm afraid that is not in my remit at the minute. At some point, I would like to give that a quick go. I'm sure once you've started, it's super easy. But it just seems like a big step too far for me at the minute. Get in there. So you'll notice that the chain at the beginning was quite long, and as you go in, obviously as it's curling up, it's getting a bit shorter and shorter. Do you know what I could have done, as this is a demo one, I could have just not showed you the whole length of the chain and just told you what you needed to do. So yeah, what I'm going to do now is stop and pretend I've finished, gone all the way to the end, which you will have done. So you carry on going all the way to the end, and then when you get to the bottom, we're going to slip stitch to join to this point here. So to do that, we put our hook inside that part of the post and back out of that side of the post like we did to attach. We yarn over and pull through, and then we pull through the loop on our hook as well. And then you've attached it back to the body. Obviously it'll look much neater than mine because you won't have that extra bit that's not been done. Then we're going to put a bit of space. So we're working in the same round all the way around until the very end. So we're going to keep following this rim all the way around. So then to put a bit of space between the next tentacle, we do another slip stitch in the next space. So we've now got a small gap between each one, and then we chain again. And again, you're going to chain 46. I'm not, because as I've just worked out, that would save me a lot of time demonstrating. So let's pretend I've chained 46. And this time I'm going to half double crochet all the way back down. And this allows a bit of variation between your tentacles. So to do that, we yarn over. And again, I'm just going to go into the second chain from hook because I want it to be quite nice and tight. And 2 half double crochets in each chain coming back. And you will notice that the chain is just, the tentacle is just a little bit wider, a little bit fatter. just adds a slight difference, especially when you've got little ones playing with it. They just like the difference, to be honest. And then when you get to the bottom, which I will show you getting to the bottom, just so that you can see exactly which chain. You can see it gets a little bit tricky here. You've got, basically I've got 2 left there, so I've got 1, 2, so I'm going to do 2 into this one as well. And then 2 into that very last one there. And then because a half double crochet is actually longer than a single crochet, this time we're going to carry on using that circle round. So we're carrying on there, but I'm not going to slip stitch into that next point, to that next chain. I'm going to go into the one after, because the stitches are just a bit longer, so it is the most appropriate point to attach to. And then we slip stitch into there. And once again, we're going to put another slip stitch in the next stitch, under the next post, to give a bit of a gap before we start to chain again. And then we chain 46 again. And this time you will do single crochets all the way back down, 2 per chain, and then slip stitch into the base. So the very next stitch, the very next pillar there, and then give a slip stitch before you start to chain again. And then that will be a half double crochet chain, and then you miss one to attach it back and do a slip stitch. So you always attach with a slip stitch and then do an extra slip stitch to move on a little bit. And it's always following the same pattern of single crochet back down, 2 single crochets per chain for 1 tentacle, and then the following tentacle is 2 half double crochets per chain all the way back down. And it's chain 46 for each tentacle. And as I say, you attach into the one at the very base, the very next stitch along if you're doing the single crochet, because the base of the width of the stitch is much narrower. And then if you're doing half double crochet, it's a wider stitch, so you're going to skip a stitch and attach it to the next one. And then you always do a slip stitch to the next stitch so that you can have a bit of a gap between your tentacles, and you carry that on all the way around in that ring there. So you're keeping it all the way around, and then you will end up with something that looks like this. So when you get to the very end, you'll notice, because it works in continual circles, you actually don't have an end to the to that row that you're working on, that circle. So it's at the very end of you'll finish on a half double crochet, and then you'll want to slip stitch into the row above. And this is the only time that you deviate from that little circle that you were following. So at this point, I finished my half double crochet. If I was following the pattern, I'd go into this one here because that's the right row, but the starting tentacle is up here. So you can do that, and it really won't make much difference. Or you can just jump up a row, which is what I would normally do, and go in here instead. And then slip stitch to that point there. And then do my final spacing slip stitch on that next row up to join back to the start. And then you've got your starting stitch there. Your starting tentacle, just the next one along there. So that is the end of how to do our tentacles, and hopefully you're feeling quite pleased by the time you finish this. They're all quite fun. I'm quite enjoying using this yarn and making a bigger one than I normally do. Quite fun to feel. So you do just finish off at the end of that one, snip your work and pull through like we do each other time. I'd already cut mine and then realised I should probably demonstrate it. So you just cut, you slip stitch and then cut and pull through, and then that is you done. And join back tomorrow for the next part. Tomorrow we'll be working on how to do these inner tentacles and how to attach them. It is more wrist work, but not as tricky on that one. Alright, I hope you've enjoyed this session. If anything doesn't make sense, this is my first time trying to explain this pattern, please do just get in touch and ask a question, and I'll be back to you as soon as I can. Happy hooking!